daf is Peiches, and the daf of the Siyum will start on Pei Zayin Amud Beis. The Gemara had presented, if you recall, the sheet of Rav. Rav says that Tfilas Ne'ilah Poteres Etchel Arvis, which means that on Motzi Yom Kippur, there's no chiyuv according to Rav to daven Ma'ariv because Ne'ilah is mana balayla. So once he had that extra tefillah of Ne'ilah at night, he has no longer an obligation to daven Ma'ariv. And the Gemara asked a kasha on Rav, and that's what we're going to start today with Masechet. So you'll see there's 3 lines up before the end of Pei Zayin. And we're on Pei Zayin Amud Beis, of course. Masechet, a brisa that says that or Yoma Kippurim, the night of Yoma Kippurim, Mispalel Sheva, he recites a Shmon Esrei, which is now Sheva Brachos, Umisvada recites Vidui, Shachris, the same, Sheva Misvada, Musaf, Sheva Misvada. Here we have to add to the Girsa Mincha, Sheva Misvada. In the Ila, Mispalel Sheva Umisvada. What about Ma'ariv? And the Brisa says, the Arvis, and here we have machlokas between the Tanakam of this Brisa and Rabbi Chanina, as to what Shmon Esrei he should daven as Ma'ariv Hamotzi Yom Kippur. According to the Tanakam, it's called Sheva. Sheva is called Me'ein Shmon Esrei. Normally, this is called Tfilas Havinenu if a person is got to go out to the road, and if he doesn't have time to daven the full davening, so they shorten the davening, 3 brachos harishonos, 3 brachas achronos, and the middle bracha is going to include within it in a short form all the other brachos and psoyos. And Rav and the Tanakam of this Brisa is of the opinion that on Motzi Yom Kippur, after fasting a whole day, it's like a person, it's no worse than a person who goes out to the derech, and he could be mispal a short Shmon Esrei, it's called Havinenu, a tefillah ktsara, made up of 7 brachos. However, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel says in the name of Avosa that mispalel Shmon Esrei shlemus. He has to daven the regular Ma'ariv, all 18 brachos. And why is that? Here we go to Peiches. Mipnei shetzarich lomar havdalah. Havdalah means hatachon antonu bechonen adas. And in a tfilas havinenu, there's no possibility, according to the halacha, to insert the paragraph of havdalah hatachon antonu. Tosfos on the top of the Amud, Dibra Masel Mipnei, in the name of Rabbi Yaakov Merlinich, asks the following question: why can't we just incorporate a very short kind of Havdalah in the middle bracha of the Tefillah Mein Sheva Havinenu? And he answers that since, generally speaking, the whole year round, he's mispal only a full Shmon Esrei, 18 brachos shlemus, therefore we're not going to change the seder and inject a bracha that is foreign in the middle of the Shmon Esrei brachos, and therefore we're going to have an integration of Atachon Antonu into Tfilas Das, Atachon Elodim Das, and for that we need to recite the entire Shmon Esrei. In any event, one thing is clear, but both the Tanakama and Rabbi Chanina, they both agree that your chayev must daven Ma'ariv on Motzi Yom Kippur. The question is whether you daven a shorter Shmon Esrei or the regular classic long Shmon Esrei, but everyone agrees that you have to daven Ma'ariv Motzi Yom Kippur. Now, according to Rav Shita, once you daven Ma'ariv, once you daven the Ilah, and the Ilah requires nightfall, then you're parted from Ma'ariv. So this brisa is a contradiction to the Shita of Rav. Bavli seems to be assuming that Tfilas Arvis Chova, that's machlokas in the Gemara, and if Tfilas Arvis is Chova, then we make sense out of Rav's statement that Tfilas Ne'ilah as an extra Tfilah, Poteres Arvis. But if you hold Tfilas Arvis Rishus, which is actually our, then this whole discussion of Rav seems to be totally inappropriate because you're not even chayav Ma'ariv the rest of the year. So why are you talking about Motzi Yom Kippur? Yerushalmi, on the other hand, holds that if Tfilas Arvis Chova, then even Rav would agree that you must daven Ma'ariv and the Ela could not replace Myra. The issue here of Rav is because Tfilas Arvis Rishus, but even though Tfilas Arvis Rishus, nevertheless we try to do whatever we can to daven Myra. And that's what L'chadchili you should do. So the Yerushalmi says that Rav Shita is that on Motzi Yom Kippur, because of Tfilas in the Ela as an extra Shalom Etzrei, he doesn't have to have Tfilas Arvis in his mindset. In any event, getting back to our question, the steer from this Bryce onto Rav, the Gemara answers Tanoihi. We're going to try to prove that the issue of whether or not Filas, the Ela, Poteris, Shal Arvis is in fact a machlokas between the Tanakama, the following Brisa, and Rabbi Yosef. Isani, we learned that the Brisa called Chayove Tvilos. All Tmeim who are obligated in Tvila, they have to go into the mikveh in order to retire themselves. Ovlin Kedarkon the Yoma Kippur. Normally on Yom Kippur, there are 5 categories of Iser Inui that we've discussed in the past, and one of them is Rechitza. You're not allowed to wash your body. But in the case of Tefillah, for the purpose of Tara, there's a pressing need, and we'll explain why, that he should be Matayr himself. And therefore, it's considered not a Rechitza Shal Tainu for the sake of enjoyment and pleasure, but rather a Rechitza Shal Mitzvah, and that's permissible. Now, what mitzvah is pressing is the question that we're going to address. In any event, the Brisa gives us a whole list of cases of Tumah. We're going to have this Brisa and the next Brisa in which we allow him to be Tovel because of the pressing need, even on Yom Kippur. We classify and define that tefillah. It's not a tefillah shel tainug, and therefore it's mutter. So, for example, we have the case of Anita and Yoledis. Now, what's unique about these 2 categories of Tumah is that normally when a person is tummy and they need 7 days of Tara, they can go to mikvah on the 7th day, and then with Hariv Shemesh, with nightfall, they are tummy. But the exceptions to that rule is both Nida and Yoledis. They both need a full 7 days, and they can only go to mikvah the night after the 7 days, which means Or L'Shmini. So if, let's say, the 7th day of Nida or Yoledis, again, Yoledis would depend upon whether she gave birth to a boy or a girl, but on the very last day is Erev Yom Kippur. They have to go to mikvah the night of Yom Kippur, and that's exactly what the Brisa says, is Tovlos Kedarkam B'Leil Yoma Kippur. I'll carry. So let's say during the course of Yom Kippur, he had a Shifas Zera, he has seminal emission, he's Tomei, a Tumas Yom, and that's called a Tful Yom. Tovel V'Holich Ad HaMincha. If he saw the carry before Tfilas Mincha, then there's a pressing need to allow him to be Matayr himself. This is based on a Sugya Baba Kama that's called Takonas Ezra. Ezra made a takana that a Balkari is not allowed to speak Divrei Torah, he's not allowed to recite brachos, he's not allowed to recite tefillos, and now this person never on Yom Kippur became a Balkari, and according to Takonas Ezra, he's not permitted to daven mincha. So if this happened, that he became a Balkari before mincha, in order to allow him to daven mincha and circumvent the prohibition of Ezra, we will allow him to go to mikvah, and it's not a tefillah shel time. And now he can daven mincha. If, on the other hand, he saw carry after mincha, then there's no pressing need that would override rechitza on Yom Kippur. Let him go to mikvah after Yom Kippur. You'll ask me, but what about Ne'ilah? Doesn't he need to daven Ne'ilah? And Balkari, according to Takana, says it's prohibited from davening, including Ne'ilah. But the answer is that Tfilas Ne'ilah is Balayla. Tfilas Ne'ilah is not during Yom Kippur. So for sure, before he davens Tfilas Ne'ilah, it will send him to the mikveh to retire himself and circumvent the Isser of Ezra. And now he can daven Tfilas Arv. He can now daven Tfilas Ne'ilah. And the implication here is that the reason why we're going to require of him after Yom Kippur, in this case, if he already davened Mincha and he saw carry after Mincha, we're going to require him to be toven from his carry, is in order to allow him to daven Ne'ilah. We're not interested in Ma'ariv over here. Ma'ariv is not an issue because this Tanakama reflects the sheet of Rav that Ne'ilah poteres es Arvis. There's no Arvis. For Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol Yom Kula, even if he sees carry after Mincha, according to Rabbi Yossi, the Ilah has to be by Yom. Yushalmi actually quotes a machlokes on this point between Rabbi Yochanan and Rav. This Yerushalmi in Masechet Brachos, quoted here in the footnote. Rabbi Yochanan says the ilas. What does the word ne'ilah mean? Tfilas ne'ilah b'sharei hazor. When they close the hazor, that means after they light the menorah, right before Shkia, they close the gates of the Beis Hamikdash, and at that point, that's the moment of ne'ilah, when they lock up the gates of the Beis Hamikdash, and it's still daylight. That's when Yochanan sheet that ne'ilah should be recited by day. Rav says, what does the word ne'ilah mean? Ne'ilas shari shamayim, when the gates of the heaven are closed, and that means Laila. So therefore, according to Rav, the Ilah means Laila. Now this Shita Rabbi Yossi reflects the Shita Rabbi Yochanan that Tfilas Ne'ilah is during the day. And therefore, even if he already dav mincha, then he saw Keri, we're going to allow him to go to the mikveh in order to prepare him to retire himself to spot Keri for Tfilas Ne'ilah, which has to be by day. Now, if Rabbi Yossi maintains that Tfilas Ne'ilah has to be by day, then clearly he would disagree with Rav. And there's no way that Ne'ilah poteres eshel arvis, because arvis is a Tfilas Laila, and Ne'ilah is a Tfilas Yom. So fine, now we've come to the conclusion that any brisa that you find, like we saw a brisa that indicated that there's a requirement of Tfilas Arvis on Motzi Yom Kippur, whether it's Mein Sheva and Minenu, or whether it's a full Shmon Esrei, and that contradicts Rav, that goes according to the Shita of Rabbi Yossi. And since according to Rabbi Yossi, Ne'ilah has to be prayed when it's daylight, like Rabbi Yochanan and Yerushalmi, therefore, there's no way under the sun that Ne'ilah could be Poteretz Eshel Arm. Now, once we've gotten to this brisa with the list of cases in which we allow you to go to the mikveh on Yom Kippur, now we're going to ask a stira from that brisa to another. Reminu, we have another brisa that has a long list of various tmeim. We have a zav, a zava. Now, just to give you a little background, a zav means that he had shifa zera machmas chol, not a normal shifa. And it comes out of his body without kishu, without hana. And if he saw two re'iyos on one day, twice he saw a re'iyah zav, or on two consecutive days, one re'iyah on each day, he becomes Tomei Tumas Zav. He has to count Zayin Nikiv, where he doesn't see any Ziva, and then he's Tovel Litu Masa. And if he sees three Re'iyos, either on one day or three consecutive days, then he has to bring a carbon. That's already a different Allah. Now we have a case of a Zava. That's a woman who saw a Dam during the 11 days between Nida and Zava. That's Mei Ziva. And once again, she needs Zayin Nikiv, and she goes to mikveh afterwards to be Nitara. So then we have a bowl Nida, person had a relationship with Nida, and it's may mess, and someone who came in contact with the corpse. And in all these cases, they are going to count 7 days. And then Tovlim Kedarkam B'Yom Kippur, which means that if Yom Kippur is day 7, they go to the mikveh on day 7. And here there's a difference between Boel Nida and Nida herself, because Nida herself, we said, can only go to mikveh the next night, the night of the 8th. And that's the second part of this price. And Nida v'yoledes tolos kedarkam b'leil Yom Kippur. If their 7th day was on Erev Yom Kippur, then Motzei, the 7th day, they go to mikveh, even though it's Leil Yom Kippur. So the 7th day of Nida, of Yoledes, was on Erev Yom Kippur. She goes to mikveh right after nightfall on Kol Nidre night. And that is going to be considered a rechitza of mitzvah, not a rechitza shel time. I'll carry. And now we expect to see a repeat of the machlokes Tanakama Rav Yossi that we saw in the previously quoted brisa. And yet, to our surprise, Tanakama here of this second brisa says, Tovil v'holik kol yom kula, which is exactly the shita of Rav Yossi. And Rav Yossi here is quoted in the second brisa, min ha-mincha l'mayla ena yachol lipol. So we have huchlefu hashitos. It's exactly the opposite of different shitos. And the Gemara says, Lo kash. I can reconcile the two statements of Rav Yossi. They're not contradictory. Why? That last brisa, which says that according to Rav Yossi, Litbol, that's the case of the Tzoli Tfilas Ne'ilah. Right? We said that Rabbi Yossi requires Ne'ilah by day. He already davened Tfilas Ne'ilah. So that at the time of Mincha, he davened Ne'ilah as well. So once he already davened all the Tfilas Hayom, he davened Mincha, he davened Ne'ilah, then we don't need Tvila. There's nothing pressing to allow him to be Tovel on Yom Kippur. But the Brisa that we quoted earlier, where Rabbi Yossi says Tovel, Kol Hayom Kulo, that's a case of Lo Tzoli. He hasn't yet davened Tefillah as Ne'ilah. Ne'ilah is Mipod Yom, and therefore he goes to Mikvah. Whereas Akasha Edit Tzoli, if, according to you, the Brisa is talking about a case where you already davened Ne'ilah, my Kamayid Rabbanim, what pressing need is there once he's already davened Tefillah Ne'ilah for the Rabbanim to allow him to be Tovel on that very day? He gains nothing. He's already davened Tefillah Ne'ilah. He's covered his bases as far as all the Tefillos are concerned. And we're saying now that the last price that we just did, which we called Muflefes Hashita, that price is talking about a case where you already davened Tefillah Ne'ilah. If you already davened Tefillah Ne'ilah, then why is it that the Brisa records the Shita the Chachamim, Tovel, Valkori, Tovel of a Hole Kol Yom Kula? What? What do you mean Kol Yom Kula? What pressing need is there to allow him to go into the mikvah? More answers, my time to Rabbanon, Kasavi Rabbanon Tefillah Bizmana Mitzvah. We'll explain this based on a passage. In Dvarim Chav Gimel, the Torah says, V'hoylif nos erev yirchatz b'mayim. And Chazal understood, according to one opinion, that means yirchatz b'mayim at his first possible opportunity, no delay. And that's called Tefillah Bizmana Mitzvah. So the pressing need for the Valkyrie to be Tovel on the day, even though he's already, it's Yom Kippur, so he's already davened both Mincha and Ne'ilah. He doesn't need to avoid violating the Takanas Ezra. But nevertheless, the Chachamim maintain that because Tefillah B'zman mitzvah, that mitzvah is itself a pressing need, irrelevant to the making him tar for Tefillah, irrelevant to that. To override, so to speak, Yom Kippur and classify this Tefillah not as a Tefillah Shel Taina. So the Gemara says, well, if then the Chacham say Tovel Kol Yom Kula because of Tefillah B'zman mitzvah, and yet Rabbi Yossi says that in a mincha l'mayla, once he already davened Ne'ilah, Eino Yochel Litbol, obviously, is Rabbi Yossi Savar Lavnu. He doesn't accept this interpretation of the pasuk, and the Torah does not require that at your first possible opportunity you must go to the mikvah. But Tanya, I'm going to prove to you from another brayso so that that's not true. That Rabbi Yossi holds Tefillah B'zman mitzvah. And the brayso is talking about a case of Harei Shahaya Shem Kosev al Besara. He had written the name of Hashem on his skin, and now he wants to bathe. Now the problem is that if he goes into a bath, then the water will erase the name of Hashem. And the Torah says, and this is a pasuk in Dvarim Perek Beis, you have to destroy the names of the idols, but you're not allowed to do that for God. So destroying the name of God is a violation of a lav d'oraisa. And therefore, Rezalo Yirchatz. He should not wash his body. V'lo yasuch. He should not rub oil and anoint himself because he might erase the name of God. V'lo yamid b'mokom hatinofes. He's not allowed to stand in a place where there's filth because he's got the Shem Hashem written on his hand. But in his download, tefillas mitzvah, but now he has a tefillah of mitzvah. What's he going to do? He needs to go into the mikvah. So the recommendation is korech olav gemin. He should wrap that place where the name is written on his body with a blade of grass, a reed grass. That's called gemin, and that's going to protect the shem, so it's not erased with the water that comes onto his body. And then V'yored V'tovel. Yored V'tovel Kedarka. We're not going to ask him to run around looking for a gemin, because in the meantime, the clock is moving and time will pass. He's not allowed to actually erase the name of Hashem by pushing his hand into the shame. That's called shifshuv, because then if he rubs it, he's going to be mochek shem Hashem biyadayim, with an active. Now, what is this machloket over here? The Tanakh says that we have to run around looking for a gemi in order to avoid the possibility of Fikas Hashem. Rabbi Yossi is not interested. We don't want to delay and have him run around looking for gemi. Kaimalon, the Gemara in Shabbos, when it quotes this machloket, explains to machloket that the tefillah b'zman mitzvah pligi. The Yesod HaPlugta is whether or not tefillah b'zman mitzvah. And we're talking about a case where he has no gemi, and if he's going to run around and look for a gemi, he's going to be delaying his tefillah. And the Chachamim in this brisa that tefillah b'zmana ain't a mitzvah. It's okay if he delays. Let him run around and look for a gemi. Better that he look for a gemi and delay his tefillah than be tova without a gemi and run the risk of erasing the name of God. Rabbi Yossi holds tefillah b'zmana mitzvah. And therefore, we want him to go into the mikveh as soon as possible. We're not going to run around and look for a gemi so that we don't delay the mikveh, the tefillah. So come to the Rabbi Yossi holds tefillah b'zman mitzvah, not the way the Gemara answered it originally, that Rabbi Yossi holds tefillah b'zman eino mitzvah. And the Gemara answers, there are two Rabbi Yossis. That's always a good answer. He, the brisa, which quotes that Rabbi Yossi holds min mincha l'mayla lo yitvom, and there's no pressing need once he davened Ne'ilah, we're not going to allow him to be tovel on Yom Kippur. That's Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. He's the one who holds that tefillah b'zmana eino mitzvah, but and we're going to prove that now. But this brisa that we quoted here, where Rabbi Yossi doesn't want him running around looking for a gemi to protect the shame, is because tefillah b'zmana mitzvah. But that's a different Rabbi Yossi. The Rabbi Yossi of our brisa, mincha l'mal lo yitbol, that's Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. Sanya, we went to the Brisa Nida. This is a very complicated sugi. Rashi already tells us here that, this is not the place to go into the details. There's machlokas beisil beit Shammai about a woman who came and she never had a hapala, and she had a miscarriage, and she doesn't know exactly when she had the miscarriage. She doesn't know if it was a male. She doesn't know if it was a female. And she's not even sure when the Yom Tefillah is, because that depends on all these factors as to whether and when the miscarriage took place and whether it was a male or a female. So there's a long, complicated machlokes between Beisil Beit Shammai, how many times she needs to be toveles because of the suffix that she's in. And Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Omer dayal tefillah shetei bachrona. You know what? Let's wait until all the days pass. So we're not sure exactly when the days of Tumah have completed themselves. So wait to the last possible day of Tefillah. And there's no need for her to be Tovelis before that. So in a case of Suffolk, and we don't know whether it's Igiyas Man Tefillah or Lo Igiyas Man Tefillah, Tefillah Bismana Eina Mitzvah, therefore she doesn't have to tip through the tulips to make sure that she's tovelis at every point that might possibly be the Zman Tefillah. Let her wait until the end when there's no longer a suffering. So the Rabbi Yossi in the Brisa of Gemi, who says Yored B'Tovel Kedarko, because he holds Tefillah B'Zman Mitzvah, that's Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. That's not the Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. Ton Rabbanon Haroeh carry the Yom Kippurim. He saw carry on Yom Kippur. Yored v'tovel. Second,